Hi, everybody. Welcome to this month's edition of Ballpark Figures. I am your host, Shakeia Taylor. I assume many of you know me by now, but if you don't, I am a writer for the Chicago Tribune. Tonight's guest is Jaffe, who I know you know. He's a senior writer for Fangraphs, author of the Cooperstown Casebook, and creator of the JAWS metric for the Hall of Fame analysis. He founded the Futility Infielder website, was a columnist for Baseball Prospectus, a contributing writer for Sports Illustrated, and a contributor to more than a dozen books, including Baseball Prospectus's Extra Innings. He has been a recurring guest on MLB Network, a member of the BBWAA since 2011, and a Hall of Fame voter since 2021. Hi, Jay.
Hi, Shakeia. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm pretty good here.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us to talk a little baseball and other things. I guess I gotta ask you just right off the top, Hall of Fame this year, are we pleased with what happened? Who was voted in? Who wasn't?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm very happy Scott Rowland was voted in. He's a candidate who I've championed since the outset when he hit the ballot, and was roundly ignored the first time around, but it was gratifying to see his stature climb as as people got more appreciation of the advanced statistics. Fred McGriff would not have been my first choice from the candidates on the ERA committee. That whole process, I was a little not particularly wild about. I mean, I think that obviously, I think that Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens should have been elected by the writers. I think they should have been elected by that format. I think that he was nowhere near the best candidate from among that group. I'm not at all surprised that he got in, and I'm happy for Fred McGriff, the man. I mean, he was a very good player. Always carried himself well, and hearing him talk about what the honor meant to him, I can't begrudge him that joy, and I would hate to sound like I'm raining on his parade. He was going to get in if he got into 500 home runs, no matter what the numbers beyond that said, and the player strike, the 1994 player strike, pretty much stopped that from happening. So. It's fine. There are other candidates I would like to have seen get in via both processes, but we're working towards getting more in on the writers' ballot. I don't know what's going to happen with the ERA committees, but that process we're going to see a slowdown.
You mentioned Barry Bonds. I gotta bring that up. Like, Barry Bonds is a controversial figure when it comes to not just baseball generally, but Hall of Fame voting. Why do you think he should be in?
Well, Barry Bonds has an argument as the greatest baseball player of all time. I think obviously that honor is somewhat fraught and blurred by the allegations that he used performance enhancing drugs. Which enabled him to attain the single season and career home run marks. The way I've always analyzed the Hall of Fame cases and candidates with regards to performance enhancing drugs is to draw a line between what happened before testing and penalties were in place and what came after, and all what Bonds did was before there was any way to for baseball to legislate that. It was a complete institutional failure. Commissioner, players union, owners, everybody was looking the other way. That doesn't. It's not to say I condone what they did, but I don't think you can hold that to the same standard as you can a positive test or with the penalties and the suspensions that came after. And so when I've written about these guys and when I voted, I'm now a voter, I draw that distinction, and I've stuck by it.
Bonds is one of those figures that whenever I write about him, I get emails. Um, a lot of them are good, and then there are a few that are incredibly angry. People tend to hold this sport into just high regard, and they kind of, I think, take away the humanity when they do that, or take away the idea of human error when it comes to just, I don't know, everything. um to shift gears a little bit, we just had the trade deadline. I was not impressed with pretty much anyone. I'm feeling like there are going to be teams sort of limping their way into the postseason. Is there anything from the trade deadline that sticks out for you as good or bad, or?
It was really underwhelming. Obviously the Mets made a big splash by trading Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander, and the Astros and Rangers both made big splashes in acquiring those two. And the Rangers made a couple of other big additions as well. But because there are so many teams that can convince themselves they have at least a fighting chance of attaining one of those three wildcard spots in each league, there was a dearth of sellers. And so what we ended up with was a lot of teams more or less standing pat, doing very little to improve themselves, or sometimes maybe going slightly backwards. I'm writing about the Yankees for tomorrow. I don't really know what they did. They got two relievers for a bullpen that's actually pretty good already, where they didn't address their offensive needs. Even a team like the Orioles, who have the best record in the American League, I thought that their addition of Jack Flaherty was pretty underwhelming, although he looked very good today, pitching against the Blue Jays. The Cubs decided that they were in it. They actually made an interesting move to getting Jeimer Candelario. But boy, if they had decided to sell, they probably would have made out very well by trading both Marcus Stroman. Although now that we know Stroman has a hip problem, maybe that wouldn't have transpired. But Cody Bellinger certainly would have brought something interesting in return. Just confused by some of these teams' self-perception. I don't begrudge the Angels for holding on to Shohei Ohtani. I know that's the big one. I think if you're in that position and you imagine that you can try to retain him beyond this year, you have to go for it, because if you trade him, you're not going to have that exclusive window to negotiate with him. You're not going to be privy to what he's feeling. I mean, the Angels, the one thing they've done is they've shown that they can at least keep Ohtani in working order on this 6-man rotation and available for 150 something games a year now, letting him do his thing. I don't know that every team is going to be as adaptable for that, but at the same time, they could have changed the course of the organization by trading him. But I think the right move was to keep him. Even though they're in a bit of a long shot situation now.
It just, I don't know, like I was definitely underwhelmed. I also think a lot of it for some teams was, well, we don't want to get nothing. We don't want this guy to walk and we get nothing, so we're going to go for it too. The Cubs, that's an interesting situation. I don't feel that their present thing is sustainable. I don't think this team is going to hold up the way it is right now. Like, sure, they're crushing the Reds, and I know like the Reds have a lot of young, fun talent, as seen on my T-shirt today. But I don't know that beating the Reds is a statement right now.
Right.
Considering the Reds need some pitching in a big way. I went to Cincinnati in June, and I just happened to be at the game where Ellie De La Cruz hit for the cycle.
Oh, nice.
It was super fun.
That's great.
It was super fun. I was sitting like the second row behind the dugout. I got a lot of cool pictures of him like flipping his dreads, and I was totally being a fan since I don't work in Cincinnati and I can do that. What do you think of him? I've seen some controversy on the timeline a little bit on Twitter.
I think he's great for the game. I mean, he's a lot of fun. He's not unlike I think the recent wave of what's the word I'm looking for? of exciting young players that I think carry themselves with some swagger and I think bring a lot of excitement. He's Fernando Tatis Jr. or Juan Soto. I think he's kind of in that group. He's a bit of a showman. Yasiel Puig before all the bad stuff emerged. I mean, it's just like the human highlight film. Very promising player. Tremendous physical gifts. We're seeing the league start to adjust to him. But I think if you're a Reds fan, you have to be elated that he's here and part of something that at the very least has really changed the narrative about Cincinnati baseball here in a very short time, because it felt like just a month or two before we were talking about the owner or the owner's idiot son and the way that he was giving fans an excuse to stay away from the ballpark. Where are they going to go? I think he's great for baseball in that regard, and we'll see if he can back that swagger with performance. So far, he really has.
What other young players are you watching? Like, who are you looking at and you're like, this guy is, and I almost swore right there, this guy is freaking awesome.
Now you're gonna make me draw a complete blank here. I have to look at the standings to think about this. It did not come. Obviously, like the Orioles, like Gunnar Henderson and Adley Rutschman, I think are they're doing great things for Baltimore baseball, and I think that's certainly something to be excited about. Who else here? Yeah, you really put me on the spot here.
Well, while you're thinking, guys, you all can start throwing questions. Everyone, I should say, start throwing questions in the chat if you want. I'll start integrating them into the conversation. I see someone already did, so thank you.
Obviously, Corbin Carroll's the other one. I think with Arizona, that guy's a lot of fun, and obviously he's helped make Arizona into a playoff contender, and that's really cool as well.
A question that we got submitted for you, I guess yesterday or so, is with the designated hitter now being universal in MLB and the Hall of Fame's website separating the DH into its own position in its Hall of Fame Explorer page, are there plans to separate DHs into their own JAWS list?
No, because not at present time. I mean, you look at the DHs that have been elected. Edgar Martinez and had a career WAR in JAWS comparable to the average third baseman, because he did have defensive value at third base for a good portion of his career. Frank Thomas compares very well to the first baseman. David Ortiz doesn't compare great to the first baseman. And he was 87%. I think 87% of his plate appearances were as a DH. But he's there with a whole bunch of the. I think the lower. There's a whole tier of them there that he's among, like Orlando Cepeda and Fred McGriff, and is comparable there. And you've also got the postseason stuff that JAWS doesn't account for. I'm comfortable with him being there. I think once you get past those guys, you start looking at Nelson Cruz, Edwin Encarnacion, Hal McRae, Don Baylor, Harold Baines. There's a big drop off between Ortiz and those guys in terms of value. I don't think we should be encouraging the election of guys who don't have who don't have the more well-rounded positional resumes and value. I mean, yes, at the same time, I am encouraging the election of, say, a Billy Wagner reliever, maybe eventually, Kenley Jansen or Craig Kimbrell. We'll see how the rest of their careers pan out. So I do understand that there's specialists in the Hall already, and that we're encouraging more. I don't see myself as doing a dedicated JAWS to DHs and finding all of a sudden that, hey, Hal McRae is worthy of election, because I don't think that's that perception, that squares with the perception of where those guys stood, in terms of their careers. We
got a few questions here, so I'm gonna just jump to those. Wow. Would the Angels have a better chance of keeping Ohtani by trading him at deadline and then trying to sign him off season with more prospects, which improves the team after trading Ohtani at the deadline, similar to Chapman going from the Yankees to Cubs and back to the Yankees before 2017 season?
You know, you can, besides Chapman, I don't think you can find very many examples where that's worked. The Yankees are in a position where they could, blow just about any offer out of the water with their financial might. It's not to say that the Angels can't, but I don't think they will. And I think that the Angels, for them, the onus is, was on them to compete with Ohtani in-house to show that they can do this, to show that they can get to a playoff spot. Sending him away, and they're just another team that needs help. So I don't know that you'd necessarily sign him there after he's seen that the grass is greener somewhere else and that he can go to any competitive situation that he wants. I think you want him to feel like he's committed to this organization, and that there's some continuity there. And you're not going to get that by trading him away and then hoping he comes back.
I have a related question. Maybe you have an answer to, maybe you don't, but I do wonder, how does the medical staff factor into Ohtani going to a team, right? Because this is someone who is both hitting and pitching, and health was a big issue, at least in the minds of people when he first came to the league.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't fully know the answer, other than we saw with the Carlos Correa situation that every team, or that teams have different medical standards, and the input of different doctors can lead to different conclusions, even when you're looking at the same player. With Ohtani, I think, you do have you do maybe worry a little bit about the impact of the extra work, but he's not being pushed to throw 230 innings. And he is only DHing. I mean, he happens to be very good at everything he's doing. I think I would worry more if it was a matter of keeping him healthy to play, center field and pitch at the same time or whatever. In a 5-man rotation, they're not doing that. They are building in precautions and whatever. But he's gonna have to pass a physical. If he goes somewhere else, the medical stuff will be shared, because that's the way teams do it. They'll share that stuff, and teams that get in serious trouble with the league. So I don't know that I have a whole lot more insight than that. But it just, other than maybe don't sign with the Mets because they might find something they don't like.
The Mets are an interesting story right now. Like, I feel like there's a lot of, there's a lot of disappointment from Mets fans, particularly in my baseball group chats, where people don't even want to discuss it at all. What do you make of the Mets situation right now?
Yeah, I think they're making lemonade out of a whole bunch of lemons here. Obviously, they set a record with a huge payroll. They went into the season with very high hopes. They did have, I think, some areas of concern, and those areas have kind of multiplied. I mean, depending on a 40-year-old pitcher and a 39-year-old pitcher, and also a 35-year-old pitcher. That's a lot of aged pitchers and a lot of mileage, and that hasn't gone well. But we also saw, weird regressions from, like Jeff McNeil and a few other players, and it all fell apart pretty quickly there. I think they did the right move by pulling this apart. I think they did very well in both trades of the aces. I think they could have been a little bit more aggressive in terms of some of their other players. They did trade Mark Canha and Tommy Pham. Be sad to see Canha go. He really fit in well in New York. But thinking about it, if you're an owner, like a wealthy owner, there's only so many ways. You're kind of stuck in terms of the ways that you could put money into buying talent. Obviously, you could pay free agent prices, and you can get guys who are 26 to 32 or whatever, and hope that they hold out for these long-term contracts. Obviously you can sign them later, but you're trying to get them at a prime age, but you're limited by the collective bargaining agreement as to how much money you can put in to pay draft bonuses and to pay international bonuses. Now, what they did there is they bought prospects essentially by absorbing huge amounts of the two pitchers' salaries. Now, the headline for many people is, oh, they're paying these guys $90 million not to pitch for them anymore. Okay, but with that money, they've also added, some premium prospects to the fold in ways that they could not have done before. They used their financial muscle to get, let's just say, 4 50 future value prospects into the system, which is, say, guys who can at least be average major leaguers. We judged, maybe it's not all 4 of them that level, but 4 very useful prospects, at the upper end there that have dramatically improved their farm system, because that was one of the real problems as they looked at, ahead, was they're spending all this money because the farm system is bare. They couldn't get, aside from Francisco Alvarez, who's been great, and Brett Beatty, who has not been great but has some promise, they didn't have a whole lot of ready talent to fortify this team. Ronnie Mauricio, I think there are certainly fans pining for him, but his plate discipline is such that I think the organization is wary itself of what's going to happen with him. So they threw money at something, and in a way that most teams can't do. And I think that probably is the underrated element here. I don't know that would work for everyone. We'll see if it pans out. But by buying at that level, you've got guys who've risen 1 or 2 years through the minor leagues. They're on the cusp of the major leagues, and you probably going to be able to help you. They've gotten through those first layers of the amateur years.
With a WAR of about 61, is Sal Bando someone the Veterans Committee should consider in the future?
Well, I really liked Sal Bando. I wrote a tribute to him when he passed away earlier this year. I think he is one of several third basemen who were neglected by the writers, and would have benefited if the advanced statistics we're using now had been available, circa, mid 80s or whatever, when he was on the ballot. I guess it was about 84, 85. He is not the best of those candidates. I think you'd start with, leaving aside Dick Allen, whom I know you and I have discussed, and is a separate case. Among the third basemen, there's a bunch from that 70s period. Greg Nettles, Buddy Bell, and Sal Bando, I think, are the 3. I don't think you can get all of them in. And I think of the 3 of them, you can make a stronger case for Nettles based on the defensive metrics. But you could also, Buddy Bell, I think Buddy Bell's defense was actually better than Nettles, but they're both right up there. Bando has kind of the leadership thing that doesn't entirely show up in the stats. I mean, he was, the captain of that A's team. Third basemen are so underrepresented in the Hall. He would hardly be a shame, but the process right now is so stacked against any pre-1980s candidate, particularly now that you have the Negro Leagues candidates trying to get through the same process, and only 8 slots available every 3 years for this. I don't see how you're going to get an underdog candidate like that. It is almost unprecedented to get a guy who got less than 5% of the vote from the writers into the Hall. We saw it happen with Ron Santo only because there was an amnesty granted to a certain group of players. He still never got in via the writers. He had to wait until after, wait until after he passed for the Veterans Committee to get him in. Ted Simmons is the first one to go one and done on the writers' ballot and get in via an era committee, and he had a champion within the historical overview committee in the late Rick Hummel, who did push his candidacy, and that helped him get on the ballot, which is half the battle. I mean, there was nobody doing that for Lou Whitaker or Bobby Critch. I don't see where Bando has a chance if he doesn't have somebody like that pounding the table and on the inside, and that's just the reality of it.
You mentioned these players basically competing on the ballot against Negro Leaguers. Do we think that's fair? Do we no? Okay.
I don't like it. I don't like it. Look, when they did the Negro Leagues election, when Negro Leagues and pre-Negro Leagues players became eligible again a couple of years ago, it seemed very clear to me that there, because of all the statistical research and the biographical research that had been done, that there may be 24 out there, 24 good candidates that deserve closer looks. It's not just a matter of, oh, let's let Buck O'Neill and Bud Fowler in and we're done with this era. Cannonball Redding or Tubby Scales or Vic Harris. There's a whole bunch of these guys. And, I know we talked about that ballot a bit, when it was out there, there was, a lot of worthy candidates. And so my thought was that, rather than waiting another 10 years for what was called the pre-integration or early baseball era committee to come around again, as originally planned, was that they should have a Negro Leagues and pre-Negro Leagues black baseball ballot devoted just to that, and that you could do that, every 5 years or every 3 years. You could incorporate that into the existing process. Instead, the Hall of Fame liked the idea of giving them, continued shot, which I think that part was the right thing. But the way that they streamlined the process by trimming it to basically 2 doors, 2 committees for players, 1 for post-1980 managers and executives, I think really just creates an incredible bottleneck that makes it hard for anybody to get in. We've done some statistical modeling. When you've got 3 votes for 8 candidates, unless there's like 1 or 2 clear candidates, you're not going to get anybody in. And I think we saw that with Fred McGriff, being the only candidate to get in off of the more recent ballot.
We got another trade deadline question. Thoughts on the Marlins and their deadline acquisition?
I like that they were somewhat aggressive. I don't think that Josh Bell. I don't think that Josh Bell is particularly helpful. I mean, it's I think you could look at anybody with a history of solid production who's underproducing and think, maybe a change of scenery will help here. You get just slightly different circumstances. Maybe the ballpark was in his head. Maybe he didn't mesh with the hitting coach. I don't know. I don't know any of these things to be true about his situation in Cleveland. There's player variance. Performance variance happens all the time. But that was not an overwhelming addition to me. They did address. It was funny. They did address their third base situation by trading Gene Segura away. Segura and Bell both made my annual replacement level killers lists. Spotlighting the weak spots on contenders. I think that's the first time 2 of them have ever been traded for each other in the 6 year, at least in the 6 years I've been doing this at Fangraphs as a trade deadline feature. I'm trying to think. They traded Garrett Cooper away to the Padres. I can't remember everybody they got. I know that our analyses at Fangraphs, we did not come away particularly impressed that they had improved their lot, but the fact that they're in it, the fact that they did something, it may work out. And I think that is at least worth acknowledging.
What do you think of the Guardians and the getting no hit after the
Boy,
deadline?
oh boy, oh boy. Yeah. They're a puzzling team because obviously that organization has a history of success in recent years in the Terry
Do
Francona
they?
era.
Do they?
Well, I think, okay, we're now 7 years past their time in the World Series, but you know, they're generally in it every year. Or generally in
Mhm.
the playoff hunt every year. It's puzzling to me how weak their offense is. They're last in the majors in home runs. It's like everybody has suddenly turned into Stephen Kwan. Um, and I think that they've invested too much in a certain type of ball player, while not acknowledging, I think the need to be more diverse in the way that
Mhm.
they assemble the lineups. And they've also had some bad luck. Andres Jimenez last year was great. Ahmed Rosario was very good. What happened to those guys? Rosario is one of the worst players in the American League this year. Certainly defensively, the worst infielder. And Jimenez is suddenly, very ordinary. I wonder what's going on there. To me, it's a mystery because that team, based on what we saw last year and how well they played against the Yankees, they're a competitive team. And
Yeah.
I thought that they should have been, I should have been, maybe 10 games better than they are at this juncture based on the talent. Now, some unfortunate things like Bieber getting hurt, but that, they've had pitching depth and that hasn't been a problem for them. So I'm surprised.
I feel like as a fan of the team, I have learned to just not have expectations. That way I cannot be hurt again. Living
Yeah,
living in Chicago.
I know that feeling. I understand that feeling.
Yeah, like living in Chicago, I get reminded of their failure pretty often. And I just feel like they stuck to this like underdog identity and it's not working. Last year it was fun and it was cute and we had SpongeBob and all that and rocking the baby, but this year, I don't know. I feel like the identity isn't there. No one looks like they're having a good time. I'm certainly not. And the division itself is kind of smelly.
Ugh.
So it's like, yeah, you could win the division,
Smelly.
but what does that even
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
Like you win, but at what cost? Like, what does
Yeah,
this matter?
I think maybe they've benefited for too long. The kind of the low bar that the AL that is the AL Central,
Yeah.
um, only having at most three competitive teams at any given time, and then two that are just mailing it in, or wind up just doormats even when they're trying, which I think is how I would
Hmm.
characterize the Tigers right now.
Hmm.
The Royals, Jesus. I don't know what's going on there, but
I have a fun
it's like a
Royal story
performance,
for you.
art. Okay, sure.
Okay, so I went to Kansas City in June, and I did a very cool panel at the Linda Hall Library with um, Sean Foreman and oh God, I can't remember this man's name. He's gonna kill me. But from the Royals, the head of their like analytics department,
Uh-huh.
and then Brian Kenny was the moderator, and um, fans of the Royals were basically like, "Are we gonna win another game? Are we gonna win another couple of games? Like, what is happening here?" Like, they really were just like, what's going on? Why can't we get over the hump? And there was talk of their last World Series, and I just kind of shrugged that stuff off. But I went to the ballpark. It was my first time there. People kept asking me what I thought. I think all ballparks are underwhelming. I'm not that guy. But while there, sitting next to a guy, I've never met him before. He's got a Southern accent. We're both there by ourselves. And the Royals still do kiss cam. So me and this guy are like, having our drinks and, talking our shit. It
Oh
was
no.
me. There it is. And the camera's coming around and he says to me, like, I was wondering if they were gonna put the kiss cam on us because my wife would have been like, I know what that was. You had more than 2 beers. And I hop on Twitter and I tweet what this guy said. And I go, did this guy just imply that he would have kissed me if
Oh
a
no. Oh
complete
no.
stranger,
Oh.
a complete stranger? It was the funniest thing.
God. The kiss cam, this is a recipe for discomfort in this age. It's this age of, um, explicit consent and this, wider, or I think learning to widen our assumptions about gender and sexuality and attraction. The kiss cam has become very archaic. I think Kauffman. I've only been to Kauffman for one game. I covered the Royals, what turned out to be the 2015 ALCS clincher, the one where Lorenzo Cain's mad dash from first base, and that was really freaking cool. And I've been watching Kauffman Stadium on TV, since the George Brett Royals in the '70s, and so to get there, and I know it's been renovated and whatever since then, it was really cool. I think it's a pretty good ballpark, and I think in some ways it's a great ballpark. And I know that there's talk about building a new ballpark and whatever, but the team is, they had the success in the mid 2010s with those two World Series teams, but it's like that island of success is all that's there for the last 20 years now. I mean, and they're making stupid trades. I mean, this Nicky Lopez for Taylor Hearn trade is like, there's nobody in the industry who will defend that. I don't know what they were doing. I don't know how they value talent. It's not, it does not square with any valuation of the talent that anybody else in the industry is using. And so I just kind of feel like there needs to be a significant regime change there, and a greater commitment from ownership, to spend money. I mean, look, build your Sal Perez statue, but move on. It's because this you can't milk that much more glory out of 2014 and 2015. That's not going to sell tickets anymore.
I mean, you got Pat Mahomes across the way. Maybe they should holler at him a little bit.
Yeah. Well, he's part of the ownership. He's part of the ownership group now. So yeah, And granted, he's got a day job, so he's.
I mean, I just feel like when you're just a few, 100 feet maybe from how many times have the Chiefs won? Don't actually tell me. But like when you're just a few 100 feet from that many Super Bowls, you got to feel a little like a little brother. Like I always refer to things like that as like, the Michigan State relationship, where somebody feels like the big brother, little brother. But the Royals, they make me sad. They make me very sad for those fans. I hope they get something good soon. Oh, why aren't postseason stats and games included in JAWS?
Nobody's ever calculated postseason WAR. If there was a postseason WAR, I would at least think about it. But I think here's the thing: you look at baseball history, the weight that people put on postseason play has varied dramatically over the years. There are a whole bunch of pitchers who are in the Hall of Fame who, let's say, they won somewhere between 150 and 200 games, and they had two really good World Series, like Chief Bender or Lefty Gomez or Dizzy Dean or somebody like that, and they're in the Hall of Fame because of that. It's the pre-television World Series when it was still, even though you couldn't actually see the players, it captivated the nation. It was on every paper. You'd have people in the town square watching people move pegs around to represent, where the base runners are as the radio played or something like that. It had an outsized proportion, and that was when the pennant winners went straight to the World Series, and now we've got 4 layers of playoffs. You've got 20 games or something like that somebody can play in there, and you've got, it's still going to be a small sample size, but over the course of a career, you had like Derek Jeter putting up a full season's worth of stats. Mariano Rivera putting up a full season's worth of stats. It's very strange how that has changed. It's tough to equalize the opportunity to compare them, when there's not an equal opportunity to accumulate this stuff. So I think I like having the postseason stuff separate because we can understand that it's a more subjective thing to weigh. You're weighing the achievement versus the opportunity, and not every, Ernie Banks, I think, is a good example. Do we want to penalize Ernie Banks for not getting to the World Series? It wasn't his fault. This Cubs teams were mediocre. At the same time, the postseason success is part of some of these guys' story, and David Ortiz, I think, being a great example. I mean, yes, he was very good in the regular season. He was unreal in the postseason, and we have to account for that. But I don't think it necessarily needs to be just numbers. And I don't, Jaws doesn't have to be a one number binary decision. It's a tool, and if we want to acknowledge that postseason stuff is an important thing to consider, but maybe a fuzzier thing, or awards, or whatever, that's fine. I don't need my system to be the answer, to account for every single thing.
With the relative lack, of second basemen in the Hall of Fame, do you see this being corrected by voters and committees?
Is there a lack of second baseman in the Hall? I don't think that I would say that. There's a lack of good second base candidates upcoming because of the way that Robinson Cano pissed his chance away, and Dustin Pedroia and Ian Kinsler kind of flamed out, and Jose Altuve, we don't know what's going to happen with him. But there's 20. I guess we're a little short. 20 Hall of Famers in the position. That's on the lower side. I don't know. I mean, look, let's put Lou Whitaker in. Let's start there. Let's put Lou Whitaker and Chase Utley in. That'll start beefing, and Bobby Grich. That'll start beefing up the ranks. Those are three guys I strongly believe should be there. Did I get all that question?
Yep. And you named the people
good.
that they did pretty much.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I'm not strong on Willie Randolph, but I think Willie Randolph's not a bad candidate either.
Joe Mauer will be eligible next year, and you've been open about how strong of a candidate you feel he is. Can you share why you think he should be inducted?
Yeah. So Joe Mauer was an especially good hitter for a catcher, especially good hitter, good enough to win 3 batting titles. No catcher has ever done that. And batting average, of course, is not everything, but his on-base percentage and his overall production are great. I have him 5th all-time in peak WAR, best 7 seasons. All of those are seasons as catcher. He doesn't really gain anything by padding his stats at first base, and that seems to be this mistaken notion that he caught less than 900 games, I think it is, and we don't have that many catchers that are in the Hall with that. Whereas Carlton Fisk caught 7,000 games and has knees that shake like maracas now. Mauer had a short career because of concussions. He was moved off of catcher because of repeated concussions. He still was one of the 5 most valuable catchers of all time at his peak, based on I think the existing version of WAR. We haven't even accounted for his pitch framing. He was a plus pitch framer too. I have him 7th in Jaws, and that's well above the standard. And again, that's not accounting for pitch framing. I think he's a very strong candidate. I think the largest anti-Mauer contingent seems to be a certain segment of Twins fans that are more worried about the way that the Pollard family has spent its money, and believe that that he was somehow robbing them by getting paid. Was it $23 million a year, even when he was a comparatively light hitting first baseman? I don't really understand that, but I've seen it enough to have diagnosed it. But I really do think that Mauer, I think, such a wholesome figure. I know we joke about it on Twitter. a bit just how wholesome he is. Milk drinking Joe Mauer. But I think he was great for baseball, and Twins. I did not really get quite over the hump to the extent that they wanted to. They've dominated by the Yankees in the postseason, and inevitably, again, fan bases have a tendency to blame their best players when they should be blaming management for not investing more in the team. So Mauer suffers a little from that, but I think Joe Mauer is perfectly worthy of being in the Hall of Fame, and I hope he gets there quickly because, man, I get ferocious when I argue about it with some people.
I can imagine the type of debates you get caught up in. Like, I feel like people probably, I try not to read your mentions. I do read when you tweet people and
God,
like,
please don't,
tell them to go away. I think that's funny, but I can't imagine what it's like for people to constantly debate your opinion all the time.
It's look, I am very privileged to be in this position where I am, a go-to authority on the Hall of Fame. I've worked very hard to attain that position and to defend that position, and it's flattering when people, but there are times, I think somebody asked me about Sal Perez and Yadi Molina, and like an offhand comment turned into, a garbage fire in my mentions. Because I have to be careful because these are polarizing candidates. Fan bases have strong emotions. I have to make sure, I think for the most part that I'm not poking the bear just to poke the bear. Sometimes I have a tendency to get a little trolly about it, especially with Mauer and with Molina and with Perez. The catchers, I think, bring out maybe not the best in me. But it's,
why is that? Why do the catchers bring out?
I don't know. I think we're heading into an area where I think a good number of people are familiar with JAWS and have seen that JAWS that it works and it has helped to shape the last decade of Hall of Fame elections in particular. We have yet to enter the pitch framing era with catchers, and we're going to have to start reckoning with that very now with Mauer, with Yadi and Molina, with Buster Posey, and with Russell Martin and Brian McCann, who once you start accounting for pitch framing, they are every bit as good as Posey and Molina, and McCann won a World Series, Astros World Series 2017, but it's a World Series. A lot of playoff teams. Russell Martin was a transformative figure for two franchises. As he bounced around, legitimized the Pirates and the Blue Jays when he came to them in terms of their postseason aspirations, and was also, great with the Dodgers and even okay with the Yankees. I think those guys deserve a longer look. So I think it's the pitch framing thing and the fact that we're going to have to adjust our thinking a little bit about these guys, because it's tough to compare them to the catchers of the past using JAWS if we have this extra element there. And for a while it looked like we may, it may be like a set of data that's going to be closed soon because of the advent of automatic ball and strike system. But I think the emerging consensus seems to be it's going to be more likely to be a challenge system than a strict robot system. And so, framing is still probably going to be something that matters. And I think we're going to have to learn how to interpret that in our Hall of Fame discussions. And I'm beating the drum about that. And so I think that's kind of, I see these arguments coming 5 years out, because I knew, I was ready for this when Joe Mauer retired. It's like, oh boy, here we go. Or Buster Posey. When I wrote about Buster Posey's retirement, I said, we'll see you in Cooperstown, Buster Posey. And I was like, yeah, come on, let's go.
So is Yadi a Hall of Famer? Is Yadi and Molina a Hall of Famer? So, Allison wants to know, not me.
I think if you go by traditional JAWS, he doesn't look very good. And I think there's still a lot of people who feel, yeah, he wasn't much of a hitter. But obviously, but then there's this aura, this reputation, and very much of that reputation is substantiated by the pitch framing. So when you look at the pitch framing, I think you come to the conclusion that, yeah, Yadier Molina's a Hall of Famer. Maybe not, he's not a slam dunk Hall of Famer, but yeah, he's a credible Hall of Famer. And that jibes with the anecdotal information that we have and the perception of him within the game. But once we acknowledge that, we have to acknowledge that there are other catchers who fit that pattern. And I think, to me, that's the part that kind of gets me worked up, is because I want to make sure that these other guys are also appreciated for having those intangibles that are actually somewhat tangible.
Going back a little bit, because I think these questions popped up when we were talking about it and I couldn't see them. Talk about some of your favorites of the 24 candidates from the Negro Leagues. And then in addition to that, kind of like a side question, when do you think that bottleneck effect will be corrected?
Well, to answer the second question first, we've seen the Hall of Fame get through with the era committees, the 3-committee system. They went through it twice, so that was 6 years. The 4 committees, let's see, 2013. I think they went through that 8 years. I'm kind of blanking here. You're going to see everything. My guess is you'll see everything go through twice, and then they'll reevaluate. They want to do 2 elections for each of these committees, and then they'll most likely reevaluate, because the Hall, to their credit, they don't sit on their hands. They haven't sat on their hands with this stuff. I don't necessarily agree with where they've drawn the lines, but I do think that they were. It's very clear that they were listening to, the criticism, maybe too strong a word, but they were listening to the suggestions, and they also had their own way of looking at it. For example, when the Golden Days committee elected 4 guys and almost elected the 5th, Dick Allen, they suddenly saw a need to redraw the boundaries because they had cleaned out the top candidates for a certain period there, and felt like it was time, to reshuffle the deck a little bit. So I would say it's probably twice through on that, and then we'll get another adjustment there. As to the Negro Leagues candidates, the ones that stood out to me, the profiles that I wrote for Fangraphs, and I was coming to this with relatively little Negro Leagues knowledge to begin with, and it was a real interesting process to work my way towards sounding anywhere near authoritative on the subject, doing a lot of crash course reading of the real experts on it, and just try to assimilate that as quickly as possible. But I came away very much impressed by Vic Harris, because his managerial credentials as well as his playing credentials. Dick Redding, very compelled by John Donaldson's story. Just the way that he bounced around and pitched so many places. But I think that one's harder to quantify. But I do think that the Hall of Fame we should be finding room for that type of player in the Hall of Fame, because the barnstorming aspect was so crucial to surviving in the Negro Leagues. Surviving under those conditions. I know I'm forgetting candidates too here, but those ones really stood out to me. I was kind of impressed by Tubby Scales' numbers, but didn't have as much of a sense of where he fit in historically. There's a guy named Stephen Greens who's done for the Negro Leagues candidates. It's almost a Jaws-like system. It's not the same, but he assimilated a lot of information and kind of went through did a whole book about it. Unfortunately, I'm blanking on it right now. But I kind of used that as a roadmap, and there were so many guys in there that like, oh wow, look at that, I hope that as we continue to gather more data, that I'll get more chance to focus a little bit more on those guys, because unfortunately I haven't really had a chance to think too hard about them, since that election. And it was almost a foregone conclusion that Buck O'Neill would get in, and so much attention was focused on him. And overjoyed that he got in, overjoyed that Bud Fowler got in, and is recognized rightfully for the hardships that he faced. But I look forward to relearning all that stuff about those guys the next time they come around, and maybe I'll come away with some new favorites for candidates too.
We've been at it for almost an hour. Do you have time for like 3 more questions, or should we go? Okay. All right. No one send any more questions. Okay. I'm going to do these last few questions. 3.
I'm giving you long-winded answers. I'll get short.
No, you don't have to do that. I think everyone is enjoying it. They're getting their questions from things you're saying. So okay. I think that's great, at least to me, because I'm a giant nerd. But with more teams improving minor league facilities, pay, housing, conditions, etc., do you expect to see an improvement in player development as a result of better conditions?
I hope so. I hope we see. I hope we see fewer players dealing with the hardships that the minor league life produces. I think it's tough to measure some of these improvements, but I mean, these situations where you've got 5 guys sleeping on air mattresses in a single apartment or something like that, you got to do better than that. Got to do better than eating fast food on the road all the time. And I think there really needs to be, major investments in the nutrition. I'm glad that there's a players union for the minor leaguers. I think that will improve working conditions too, will help. So I'm optimistic. I think it's going to be incremental, and I think we're going to be hearing about it when it, if there are ways that it's not improving as much as it should.
How do you feel about the new umpire rules in the minors, assuming that you're familiar with them?
I'm not terribly familiar with them.
Well, we will move on.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah.
This is from Ben Alter. The fall 2022 version of the Baseball Research Journal contained an article in which they wrote, which proposed altering JAWS to omit D-WAR, since, with few exceptions, Hall of Fame voters use offensive stats as their primary means of evaluation at the expense of defensive stats. Did you read the article? And if so, can you comment on it?
No, I haven't read the article. I mean, is it suggesting we should only be looking at offense?
Ben, you want to answer that for me, please?
I need some clarification here. I haven't.
I'm hoping they're still here. While they're getting their answer together, hopefully, I had one more question from me. Okay. Who are you reading or watching or whatever when it comes to Negro League stuff?
Oh boy, who am I reading these days? I honestly don't have anything lined up, because it's been a while since I had the bandwidth to think about it. I read, being a parent of a small child, and covering baseball year round, I get to read maybe one book every 2 months. It's slow going. It's like I go to the gym to make 20 pages at a time, progress in my book. I just finished the Rickey Henderson bio, the Howard Bryant book. Let's see, this year I spent some time with the Gaylord Perry book. I've got, what's the next one I've got? I finished the Dick Allen book by Mitchell Nathanson. I don't have anything lined up for Negro Leagues. I do have the Oscar Charleston book on my shelf, and that one has been eyeing. I've been eyeing that one for a chance to read it. I've been tempted to go back and reread the Larry Ty Satchel Paige book, because that one really brought the Negro Leagues to life for me. This is like 10 years ago when it came out. but I also kind of feel like, oh, I need to make sure I read new stuff. That Stephen Green's book, I can't get to it immediately, but his book on making the case for 24 Hall of Famers, I thought was very good. Yeah, that's and I'm really looking forward. I actually met when I was in Cooperstown in the Hall of Fame plaque room, no less. I met Larry Lester, which was very cool. And I want to see the league. I haven't had a chance to see that yet. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that.
I'm in it. And
yeah, no, I all these very, I feel guilty that I haven't had a chance to check it out, because I know a few people who've been part of it now, and it's you put it in July, you release it in July, though. That's a tough time for a working baseball writer to find the bandwidth. Drop it in November, I'm all over it. I'll eat it up.
I mean, luckily it's streaming, right? So I feel like people can pick it up whenever. I went to a screening of it, and I was like ducking because I really hate hearing my own voice on these things. And everyone kept joking that I had like the line of the movie. And Ben has clarified for us. He said either voters should more heavily weight defensive stats or acknowledge that it's basically based on offensive stats, again, with very few exceptions. Does that help? You want me to go back to the original question?
Well, I think, okay, well, I mean, JAWS is designed to incorporate defense in. I think that's been, if there's been, a change in the way that Hall of Fame voting, Hall of Fame analysis has happened, it's that we are trying to quantify defense, and it's, it's subject, the error bars on it are there. We have to acknowledge that. I think to me it's helpful in explaining where the bar is for a shortstop versus where the bar is for a first baseman, and how to square those. How many, what's a good number of home runs for a shortstop, or whatever. Like, before we had all these kind of junk drawer collections. Well, for a shortstop, he's got 400 doubles and 97 homers. That's a good number, or whatever. It's like, that's not really, how good a fielder was he? That's the important question. How good was the whole package? How do you weigh all these things together? And like, we can at least, get our hands on a number to give us value. So I don't, I'll go back. I will look at it's in the most recent baseball research journal, you said?
2022, I think it was fall 2022.
Fall 2022, okay. I'll have to go back and look at that. I'll probably have to dig it up online, because I had to box up all of my SABR magazines, because we're trying to sell this place, and I had to declutter it. So you're seeing a much cleaner backdrop than it was 6 months ago. But I that slipped past me. So I'll take a look and see if I can formulate a more coherent response at some point.
Well, I think we got through all of the questions, and people are just now adding comments and things. So I want to thank you for doing this with us tonight and staying a little longer than usual. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, and looking forward to using anything that you write for my own argument. So thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Jay. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you all for sticking around and for sending me some good questions.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.